controlling who can use the Force and how. Um, and they address that in the show. With Anastasia and episodes 3 and 7. Like they talk about it. Specifically, the Jedi aren't the only ones, and then Chimera kind of addresses it too. Like he's like, the Jedi aren't the only way to the Force. In
Mhm.
episode 6, he kind of talks about that too. So, uh, there's definitely like a persecution element there to it. And it's one of the things that I love about the show because it's hitting on the themes that George was starting with the prequel era, which is like my favorite era of the Star Wars content that we've gotten so far. I don't know. High Republic is making a run for it, but the prequel era is kind of my favorite because of that, because of the political aspect and the kind of framing the Jedi differently. Because you knew something had to have happened for people to just accept the Jedi being eliminated, essentially
Mhm.
losing the war. So, I thought that was really cool. The original trilogy is real Campbellian. It focuses on, light and dark, good and evil, like
Mhm.
really separated. And then in the prequel era, that's when George was like, but we can get a little grayer with it,
Mhm.
and he shows the flaws of the Jedi. And then I think Leslie expands on that really well because I mean they just show up, and it's always been weird. Like they take kids, like that's weird. Like that's
Yeah.
like they explain it well, like and that's cool and everything, but like it's weird.
Yeah.
And so they show it like being weird, because they've shown Padawans getting chosen and taken before, but never really like with somebody like resisting, with never really with somebody being like, no, I'm not about that. And yeah, you kind of see the Jedi are like, yeah, we don't really care. We're gonna do what we do.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I don't think there's necessarily a comparable something I can think of as comparable to the Jedi in the current age. Um, there have been other ages where, children have been stolen and taken away. One thing that I don't think a lot of Americans really know about, but is definitely a part of American history and has to do with the Catholic Church, which Sith Babe also brought up in her notes too, is Native American people had their kids stolen by the Catholic Church to try to make them be like white people in the United States. They felt that they could just transform them by cutting off hair and making them speak their languages and separating them from their families. And so that's something I can think of. That's a pretty one-to-one comparison there.
Yeah, Anglicization, I think is what it's called. I might be pronouncing
Hmm.
that wrong too, but yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Um, so the Jedi, it's interesting because we love the Jedi. We love the Jedi as a fictional organization. If we started off with the original trilogy, especially, um, and also the prequels, and to a lesser extent the sequels, right? But also the cartoons too. But if you start off with the original trilogy, the first three movies, Luke is the Jedi. He's the one that has to come up. He's the one that has to save the universe. He's the only one that is really capable of doing these things, is how it's presented, right? It might not be true, but it's how it's presented. He has to come into his power in order to save everything and everyone, and he becomes the hero. He becomes triumphant. The original trilogy doesn't dive into the Jedi really as any sort of horrible organization, but it does touch on it because we do have, the Empire is really dismissive of the Jedi. And so, as kids, we say, like, oh, well, they're the bad guys, of course. But also, as when you become a grown up and you kind of learn how the world works, I think you kind of understand, like, people create opinions for a reason. They don't just come out of nowhere. They might not be right, but they do create opinions for reasons. So the fact that you have these guys in the Empire, they're like, oh, we don't care about your little cult. We don't care about like how about the Jedi that's over, it's done. Um, like that's interesting. The fact that the Jedi have all been hunted. That's interesting too. Like, why did these things happen? So there's these seeds planted in the original trilogy. And then in the prequel trilogy that came out in 99 and the 2000s, we really get to dive into, we know that the Jedi are good in this fictional universe, but there's a lot of things happening that makes you think, oh, maybe these guys aren't so good. Um, so it's just interesting how we are supposed to love them, but at the same time, as time goes on and we dive into what the Jedi Order is, it kind of becomes like, are these really the like super good guys? Like they're on the light side, they're using the light side of the Force, but are they always right?
Well, and I know a lot of people. I know Sis Babe's waiting to talk, but I know a lot of people had a problem with that element of the show. But that's one
Yeah,
of the things I loved about the show
me too.
because it's framed so beautifully. Because when you see, like with the first couple episodes, they set up May as evil. They set up Osha as like trying to be good.
Hmm.
They set up Soul as the hero because he's the Jedi, and they set up the Jedi are gonna save the day again, right? And then that's not how it turns out.
Hmm.
And so I think that's the beautiful part of the writing right there. And I know a lot of people had problems with the portrayal of the Jedi, but I loved it. And I think, frankly, I think George Lucas would too, based on
I think so
on what he
too.
put into and based on what he put into the prequel trilogy.
Absolutely. He left all the seeds there. Like, I don't think that this diverges from his original plan. I think it's in line with what he's been telling us from the original trilogy that, some shit went down. And even though Luke's father was once a mighty Jedi, he fell and he became Darth Vader. So, some things happened. It wasn't all like light and sunshine. Okay, Sith Babe, are you able to speak now?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey.
Hey
All
y'all.
right. All
Sorry,
right.
the stupid app. So yes, hey y'all. Hope you guys are having a marvelous Saturday. Um, the amazing points already made and kind of like exactly where my head was when I was sort of trying to think of like um I mean like because what really inspired this was a interview with Leslie and her describing like how a lot of these shows that she does is like avatars, or she creates like avatars for herself in it and in the
Mhm,
shows, and just with like the idea behind someone who is restricted and not allowed to be who she is, because it's not seen by the society that she's growing up in um, as acceptable. And
mhm,
so like when you guys mentioned like the cultural genocide for the Native Americans, like that's really exactly what that type of restriction eventually leads to. It leads
mm,
to taking children, it leads to you know demonizing their history, demonizing their language, demonizing the cultural sorry, I'm like shaking. I'm like super nervous. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Um,
no, you haven't been here too
no,
long. So, like, get your nerves out, shake it out.
I know. I'm sorry. It's like, how can I talk so much and still be nervous? But just like what my mind was really going for was trying to just understand like what people who have like similar beliefs but like similar or dissimilar methods on how to approach those types of things. So
Mhm,
like with the coven, I really felt like they were what she was trying to represent was freedom and acceptance, while the
mhm.
Jedi were the you know Christian, because she apparently grew up in a very Christian household,
Oh, okay.
religious household, and what those societal like what those requirements meant because of the life that her parents decided that she was going to have
Mm,
before she even had a choice. And so I just really felt like with the coven we're really seeing like you know, what the Jedi should have been if
Mhm.
they, you know, were accepting and they didn't close themselves off to what made them human or what made them uh, sentient beings or like what made them that type of whatever what type of species they are, but like what they ended up having to give up and what they ended up having to conform to in order to uplift and maintain this institution. And I really think that like it's sort of like, especially for a lot of us who grew up in a religious household and, you know, are kind of growing up into like understanding that like a lot of it was about control, a lot of it
Mhm.
was about making sure that, you know, we continued a certain type of identity and idea that was never something that we, you know, accepted or we were told we accepted at a really young age. Like I just, sorry, this I can go on like 17 tangents, but I just think that it's really it's really instructive for us to take the idea of the Jedi being good out of that like
Mhm.
very binary, you know, black and white type of category. And we really need to see them as like an institution based on and founded for control and
Mhm.
specifically for that. And no matter the good that they do, that's what I'm really trying to say is no matter the good that you do, if what your
Mhm.
foundation is to destroy the the way that people would normally behave in order to be what you believe them to be, you are still
Mhm.
a rotten institution and you are still you are not within the realm of creating a peaceful society. So
Mm. All right. Well, yeah, that dropped a bomb for sure. What'd you have to say, JC?
I was just gonna say she shows that really well too, because like Anastasia is the one who tells Osha like, hey, you know, like if this is what you want, like
Mhm.
go on ahead, you know, like I'm not gonna
Mhm.
keep, you know, like yes, I created you for some greater purpose, but you're a person and you're my daughter, and like I'm gonna let you go do your thing. And then
Mhm.
the Jedi are the ones who are like, hey, you know, like I think this is what's best for you. I'm coming to take you because I think you know, Soul especially, like I know what's best for you. Like,
Mhm.
you know, and so it's like uh, you know, kind of I don't know if oppressive is the right word, but you know, it's kind
Could
of
be.
oppressive, you
Mhm.
know.
it's that paternal like oppression. It's that I know what's best for you and you're not, you know, allowed to have any agency or any type of, you know, self-awareness that's outside of me. And I think that that was like really important. Like thank you JC for bringing up like Anna because I was like I was burning for that moment. But it's just like it's not even the fact that like, you know, she's like I created you for another purpose. You can be whatever you know want to be. She fought for that. She fought for her to be able to live in an existence that would make her happy. And the Jedi, you know, and I think about this a lot when I think about like how they did not listen to Indara. And if they had, you know, how much of a different outcome this whole situation would be. And it's just
Mhm.
that idea of like the patriarchy, that idea of deferring to the man, deferring to, you know, the institution itself. The institution is good, the institution is right, even though I myself may be wrong. You know, it's the belief that this what I'm doing is a greater good. And it's so destructive because we, you know, we infantilize people and then, you know, we take away their rights and then we don't give them any type of way out except for an extreme, you know, reaction. And then we blame them and we point fingers and we're like, well, why did you do it that way and why couldn't you figure out another way? And it's like, well, what else was I supposed to do
Mhm.
besides break free,
The
besides choke
the
you?
angry black woman, the angry black
Mhm.
Exactly.
woman.
Exactly. You know, like what at some point, when does what you do to me become too much? And that's really what I think like Leslie was trying to point to because it's not even just like the Jedi as like an institution, but like you see that Rancor is really trying to get Vernestra to see that like what you're doing is destroying people. You can only condition people for so long before
Mhm.
you get somebody who's like completely crazy and completely snaps. And that's
Mhm.
what he's saying. It's like no matter what you try to control, you cannot control a person, or like what's inside of a person. And then when that person has power, like, look where you end up. You know what I mean? Like, this is the logical steps
Mhm.
that will follow if you continue on this path. And I just think that we as a society, especially in America, have been taught, like, your institutions are important and they're right and they take care of you. And sorry, my socialism is about to come out, but it's but it's at the end of the day, it's to maintain a status quo, and it's to keep people in check and keep people in line. Look at what we're seeing today. You know what I mean? Like, any type of discourse or any type of, like, you know maybe life isn't as good as they're making it out to be, gets, snuffed out. Oh, you have the best of everything, everything is good. Don't worry about the things you can't afford right now. That's America. Like, it's that continuous, like, everything's okay, everything's okay, everything's okay. And then all of a sudden, you know somebody
Mhm.
snaps because somebody, and that's why I love that Leslie brought this back to Fight Club, because it's such like a Fight Club moment. He would have
Mhm.
kept going to work, he would have kept draining away, he would have kept losing himself to the machine, and then until that moment came and he recognized, like, no, this there is a wrongness here, there's a sickness here, and I need to pull myself out.
Kyber is Tyler Durden. Is that what you're telling me?
I'm basically saying, put a blonde wig on him and some, like, 70s glasses, and that's him.
Um, yeah, the point with the emotions is a pretty salient point. And you brought up America as a place, not only with its institutions, but I also think just as a country, we're kind of we're very much on the edge of um, a lot of things kind of falling apart and blowing up because people cannot control and handle our emotions. And so there's a lot of cultural criticism to even take away from that too, because we all live in the dominant society, which is very like anglicized, as you mentioned earlier, JC, and our society also encourages cultural control, which is part of the reason when we have in episode 6, Kamir is inviting Osha to tap deeper into her emotions, even the bad ones. That really speaks to so many of us because we all are keeping our emotions under control all of the time. We're all about to explode, I think, all of the time. We're all very angry in this country, but we don't act out on it. So, and we don't do that socially, and we don't do that because of our institutions, which will arrest us, if we go too far, if we do too much, which is justified, is understandable. But the problem is still there. How do you have people who can live fully and not suppress ourselves, not suppress our true desires, while also not going all the way into the dark side?
And that's what I think was so beautiful about the Coven, is because they
Mhm.
existed in that space where you can have
Exactly.
emotions, you can love, you can have children, but you also are aware that there's the fork in the road. And I think
Mhm.
that, like, with especially with the Jedi, like, there's always this assumption that you're going to use your power for evil. Like,
Right.
if you're not caught at a young enough age, that's where you're going. There's no other option. And
Right.
it's such a mirror on society of how, like, when you're a child, they want to, well, this is what you do, and this is the girls do, and this is what boys do. And
Mm.
they really try to infect you right away with what you should and shouldn't do, right
True.
as you're growing, so that it becomes abnormal for you when you see somebody who's different, when you see somebody who breaks the mold. You people have a reaction to it. And it's such a it's such a moment to just say to yourself, like, we could have had so much better if we were
Mhm.
just so much more accepting. And it's that's what I think that she's trying to tell us. Like, we could we could be a coven of witches. We could be a coven of witches that,
We could
you know,
all be the coven.
you know what I mean? We can all have power. We can all exist peacefully and coexist and make our lives better. And, you know, instead we have to deal with the system of hierarchy and the
Mm,
patriarchy and the social expectations of, you know, even, you know, just as we, you know, don't expect of them, excuse me, we don't expect other people to have them, we also
mhm,
fall into them without even realizing. And I think that's what also happens to Vernestra. You know, she's caught in this moment where she's like, I have to protect the institution regardless of what it means for myself, and that's what she does. And it's such, it's like, you're afraid of change, you're afraid of, you know, moving into this space where we can actually have freedom, because you have been brought up in this system and taught in this system that freedom can't exist. I go back
mhm,
to this Vulture article, like I'll give you the link for it because I think it's so important how, like, the talk about liberalism and it being the ultimate form of freedom is what she was trying to express with the, well, with the show itself. And I
mhm,
just think that, like, that's what we really need to take in, is that, like, the institution that we're taught is supposedly good can be, can and is evil, because there are people, like, people can be good and evil. And,
mm,
you know, it's fallible just as much as we are as people.
mm. Um, Freckles, you're on as a speaker too. What are your thoughts about this stuff?
Couple thoughts. So I always thought of the Jedi as cops, but
Mm-hmm,
I think this show really put it into perspective for me that they're more like the Catholic Church.
mm,
And the Catholic Church specifically, and I can't remember who said it, but it's really about controlling the access to the divine. So
mm,
when I think of them, I think of like, you know how even other Christian sects are different in that Catholics, or I don't know if it's still a big thing, but how their one of their main tenets was like you have to talk to God through a priest versus you being able to
mm-hmm.
commune with God on your own, right?
Yeah.
So I see that in the Jedi where they control access to the Force, because in this story I have always considered the Force like divine, right?
Mm-hmm,
And so if you put it in that perspective, and I think it's, now that I look back on it, it's super clear because there's this whole like missionary aspect to the story as
mm,
well, like, which is what we've been talking about a lot. But
mm.
I just think that's interesting commentary.
Yeah. No,
That
absolutely. Absolutely. I love that connection for sure, especially the missionary thing. I hadn't really put that together clearly. I think, you know, growing up in the society, you have those sorts of, you're kind of, it kind of taps into your knowledge of that kind of stuff, but I wasn't really conscious about it until you just said that. And so I love that, the missionary thing. Missionaries are intense. No offense to the missionaries that might be listening, or but that whole the whole idea of first of all thinking that other people can't reach the divine unless you give it to them, right? Like only your group of people have that access to know how to reach God, the divine, the creator, and if you don't tell people, then they just won't know. So that's really arrogant, unfortunately. And the idea that if people don't want to accept your idea of how to connect to the divine or the creator, you have to like force them and persuade them, you know, like the the Mormon dudes on the street that'll stop you and be like, hey, have you heard about Jesus? Yes, I have. I live in the United States. How could I not have heard about Jesus?
I can't stop hearing about Jesus.
I
Please.
cannot. I can't get away from the dude if I wanted to. Like,
There's a church on every corner. What are you talking about?
right? This is a very there's a lot of Christianity. I don't know if you guys notice, there's a lot of Christianity here. So yes, I have heard about Jesus. Thank you very much. But just that idea of like, well, we have to force you to think of Jesus in our way of thinking about him and come to our church. And there are so many different sects. There's Catholicism and Protestantism and Baptists. And no, you have to do it our way or else it's not valid. Just that whole idea of just the control, like you guys are saying, the control and the the absolute arrogance of everything. It's
Side note.
so intense.
The only difference between a Baptist and a Southern Baptist is one of them wants slavery. I'm not going to tell you which one.
Okay.
That part. It's a bunch of sex, but it's really about, like, you know, which one wants what at what point in history. And I think that, like, with Leslie being so, like, especially like if you know, grew up Christian, you kind of just kind of understand that there is no other option for you. Like, you're expected to be this person for the rest of your life. And you know, for her to be gay and be, you know, in love with her wife and like really out, like tattooed up, like, I mean, I remember a time it was like, you know, you couldn't have tattoos if you're a Christian, you know what I mean? And it was like, you can't do these types of things. And I feel I love her so much more because she literally saw what the Jedi were trying to do. And she also gave this interview where she was like, I didn't know that you could leave the Jedi Order. And that was really important to me when she saw that with Ahsoka. And
Mm.
it's like, you can leave that religion, you can leave
You have a
that
choice.
whatever
Yeah.
holds you back, and you can choose different. And I think the witches are really supposed to be, you know, representative of that. You
Mm.
can leave. You can go see the galaxy, Osha. You can go
Right.
join the monks, Osha. You're not held back, even though that's what they want because they need that power. It's not based on that for them.
Mm.
For the witches, it's all about love and acceptance. And
Mhm.
I just think that, like, Leslie was really just trying to tell us we could have so much more, so much better if we just were accepting of how people want their lives to go.
Mhm. So to move into the next topic, I pulled this point out of some of the notes that you sent me because you were talking about fear and love, and it wasn't something that you were like really focused on, but I thought this was a great point that you were making when you were talking about it on the in the group, which was there is a big theme around fear versus love in this show, especially because we see that Soul's fears lead to the deaths of so many women just because he's afraid, because he won't surrender to the love that the Jedi are supposed to be about. Like, that's what they're preaching, right? They're preaching, don't be attached, have an unconditional love. But he completely gives in to attachment and to fear, which is the path to the dark side. And because of his actions doing all that, we then have Osha ends up being controlled by her fear and anger. And then she meets Kamir. And back to episode 6 again. In episode 5, too, Kamir shows her his acceptance of fear and his acceptance of the dark side within him. So there's a big theme in this show around fear versus love and what each side does, even though Soul is a Jedi and Soul's a light side user, and the witches are dark side users by their own admission, or that's the perception of them. Soul is the one that gives in to his fears, and Asaya doesn't. And Asaya can ride with it. She's afraid of losing one of her kids, but she rides with it anyway. And then all the women die because he does that. There's also the light side versus the dark side because of that. Because Soul is a Jedi and he's on the light side, but his actions are so harmful. Whereas Kamir and the witches are both very committed to the dark side, which is, we haven't really seen the dark side portrayed like this in Star Wars as far as I can remember, where someone isn't like driven kind of crazy by it, or they aren't like totally megalomaniacal and want to take over the world and take over everything. The witches being dark side users, so I guess the Night Sisters, right? The Night Sisters are dark side users, and they're not like, they don't want to take over everything, but they're a little bit crazy. So the Coven and the Acolyte, they're not crazy and they don't want to take over the world, they don't want to kill everybody. And Kamir has is a little bit, he's a little bit off unhinged, but he has control, he has control of his fears. So it's interesting to have that, I think. Do you guys have any thoughts about fears and all that kind of stuff?
I think it's an interesting question because when a lot of people, even like today in real world, talk about love, it's not actually love. It's really just like a
Mm,
fear of being alone. And
mhm.
so I
Yeah.
think if you frame it into what you think love really is, I think
Mhm.
the only person that really displays love throughout the series out like in opposition to fear is May.
Mm.
Because
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna
at
say
the end,
Anastasia, but I want to hear the
well,
May angle.
of our, I don't want to say our main characters because of course my mother Anastasia is a main character, but
Mhm.
she of course loves Osha in a way that we would recognize what love is.
Mhm.
But like when you go through the list, like Soul, he doesn't love her. He just doesn't
Right.
want to be alone. Like he loves an idea of her.
Right. Definitely.
Kamir, we don't really know too much about his internal motivations, but we don't know, and we know his only experience with a close relationship was with Vernestra, which
Mhm.
who knows if he knows how to love? Because what was that?
Oh
That
my
wasn't
God.
so. It's
Disaster.
and it almost looks like obsession from him. I don't think that's what it is, but from the
Mhm.
little bit that we're shown,
Mhm.
you could argue maybe that's not love either.
Mm. That's a
And
good point.
yeah, and Osha, she doesn't really have anybody to love. Her family's gone. Her sister, she hates her because of a manufactured lie. So love that she would normally feel, she doesn't really have anybody to show that towards, and she can't love the Jedi because they can't love her back.
Mhm.
So really, we only see it with May, and it. I don't think it's a coincidence that she's also the only one that is fully like emotionally regulated. Like
Mm.
she looks like a deranged killer, but she's really just processing her emotions in a
Mhm.
logical way. Like,
Mhm.
of course, I want to kill the people that kill my family. That makes sense to me. Like,
Okay, I see where you're coming from.
that's not crazy.
I see where you're
And
coming from.
also, she's able to let Osha go when
Mhm.
she sees that that's the best thing for her.
Right.
So,
It's the ultimate sacrifice too, because like OSHA is her motivation throughout the show. Like
Mm,
that's
right.
exactly.
her
And it's
singular
also the
motivation
point
throughout the show.
about, I also don't think May has any room for fear. Like, she doesn't feel fear because she's already experienced her worst case scenario.
Mm.
Like, she saw her family die. She saw her mother die. She lost her sister, thought she was dead.
That's the worst
She's
case.
lost everything.
Yeah.
So, what else does she have to fear? Dying? Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Absolutely.
I love that you brought up that point too, that May is the only one showing real love, because I agree to that point 1,000 bajillion gazillion %. But it's also like the dichotomy of both scenarios. We're watching like all the people in Osha's life who truly love her give her control and give her the ability to make the decisions for her future and for herself.
Mm.
And I just think that that's so important, because it's not love for somebody to tell you, I need you to be this way for me, or I need you to be this way because this is what I thought or I envisioned you would be for myself. And
Right.
that's really what Soul is continuing to do. He's he's projecting his image of what he needs onto Osha, because Osha is so easily and so loving and so receptive to love, that it's so easy for him to just be like, oh well, I'm doing this because I love you, and for her not to, oh well, I know, or well, excuse me, for her not to push back on that, and for her not to be like, well, what is it about me that you love? Like, you just, what is it that you love? You know what I mean? And
You know,
it's such an eye.
I love Soul, but the more times I watch the series, the more he just irritates me. Just he's so
Can we cuss on this, or like,
right.
are
Yeah,
we?
go ahead.
He's
Reasonably,
like so
reasonably.
good. Sorry, yeah, you're right, my bad. But yeah, I mean, from the, and again, it's because we're all taught that, like, our fathers protect us, and our fathers, sacrifice for us, and they do all these things, and they're deserving of this reverence. And it's like, no, you're not. Like, no, you are not.
Right.
Just because you had a moment with my mother does not make you somebody who, deserves anything from me that, isn't just like organic and without any kind of
Right.
shackles or any kind of expectations. Excuse me, that's the word I was looking for. So it's so telling that every chance, every person, even Chimera to a degree, are giving Osha just all of the control and showing her this is what it really means when somebody loves you. They don't hold
Mhm.
you back, they don't tell you what you need to be, they give you the
Mhm.
space to be what you need to be.
And Soul's love is so like weird outside of that
Transactional.
too. I don't know if any of you guys, I have a string of failed relationships. Yes, thank you, thank you. I'll take your applause. Thank you very much. Um, thank you, I appreciate that. And in a lot of my relationships, these guys will be like head over heels. They're like, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful," but they're not seeing me like at all. And on top of that, I've enjoyed the concept of love bombing, which is when someone's just tossing out what they think is love, and it has nothing to do with who you are, because they haven't paid attention to you, they haven't tuned into you, they're not actually interested in you. They've looked at who you are, and they've looked at your face and your body, and they project all of this stuff onto you and say, okay, well, I imagine you're this sort of person in my head, and so I'm gonna treat you like this person in my head. And it's like, that's not reality, dude. That's not related to anything happening. And so every time I watch the series again, I'm just like, Soul is in that space where he's not connected to anything. But he's just like, he has these ideas that he has this special sense in the force, a special connection. Who knows if it's real or not? And he just dives into that without paying attention to anything happening. It's I just reminds me of those dudes, like
He knows best. He thinks he knows best for
he
sure.
knows best. He knows
I really
best.
do feel like he's afraid of being alone. Like I really do like dying alone. But like
Yeah.
not in the sense that like how, somebody's like, "Oh, I'm going to be alone forever," and like lets it go. Like I think he feels within himself that he's going to become more and more withdrawn. Like I think about that moment where like Osha and Jackie are talking to each other, and Jackie like reacts really quickly and turns her back and gets back to work.
Right.
Like Osha's looking at him like you don't even say nothing, like you just walk by and there's no communication,
Right.
like he creates this distance between people, and I feel like for
Exactly.
him he knows that it's just he's going to continue to become more and more of an island, so he's
Mm,
grasping at anything and anyone who will let him be the lifeboat that he needs.
mm-hmm.
And to your point, Tara, it's exactly what you were saying is it's written into the story. I mean,
Mm,
I think I know there are a lot of people who really, really like Soul and like are upset with how the story ended as far as he goes.
mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think people are allowed to feel that way if they want to, but I
Sure.
mean, it's there. It's there in the story.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you get to episode 7, you see over and over how he was attached to this idea of having a Padawan, and it made him hone in on Osha
Mm,
without any consideration for herself.
mm,
And it it constantly pops up, even to the point where he's like, "Oh yeah, Osha, you could also become a Jedi because was I was taken from my family when I was 4, and it didn't matter to me." Like it's just
right.
like
Like,
these
what is
little
that?
things.
That's
Yeah,
so. That's not okay.
it's like these little things where he's like, "Yeah, it's totally fine," but he doesn't ever really unpack that. And I agree that I think that leads to a disconnection from him in many ways.
Mm,
And um I mean, I do think that he is convinced that he loves Osha, but
mm,
I mean, I agree that like May is the only person who actually tells Osha that she loves her twice, other
mm.
than Mother Anastasia. So it's like, I mean, yeah, like
That's true.
throughout the cast, May tells her twice, "I love you."
Yeah,
Mother
like when they're
Anastasia,
kids and they did a little
yeah,
exchange. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, and then in the end of episode 5, she tells her, "I love you," and
Mm,
Osha rejects her. So I mean,
mm,
yeah, I mean, it's in there. It's in the story.
definitely.
Everything is explained in the story if people are just willing to look at it. Take your time and look at it.
Right. Actually pay attention to the story itself, and it's pretty plain that there's layers. It's not what people are pretending that it's not.
Well, and
And
Leslie
you,
wrote it that way too, where that and her team, they wrote it where like they didn't want to have to, they didn't want to treat it. She said that she didn't want to treat the audience like they were stupid. So like, there's
Hmm.
not a lot of stuff that's like blatantly explained, like, and there's not a lot of unnecessary dialogue or shit to just like show you something. So
Mhm.
like it's super important.
And
Mhm.
and you do see in the story what happens every time fear creeps in the characters, what they do as a response.
Mhm.
And that's an important point of the story is looking at each character and saying, okay, how do they change once they
Mhm.
get afraid? How do they change um once they start showing more emotion, or they release this sort of composure that they're expected to have.
Mhm.
It's all there. And to JC's point, I don't really understand why people keep saying either. Well, one thing people have said is like, oh, the story mocks our intelligence. It's like, well, maybe you should be mocked because I don't
Right.
understand what you're missing. Like
What
the
is
story
that
Yeah,
is
we
even?
all we all watch the same show, and some of us got it.
yeah, like that's a skill issue. I'm sorry. No, but like again, and I've said this before, if you really don't understand something, just ask and look into it. But like if you're just like, well, this was stupid and it was bad writing, then I just would say that that's a skill issue because yeah, we understood it and it's not spoon feeding you and it's not mocking my intelligence. In fact, it made me think more, which is what I like my shows to do.
I definitely and I agree with your point too. That it's supposed to make you think, and that's your problem if you can't, dedicate 28 minutes of your day for, thinking. But it's also, you're not, you are meant to, not enjoy Soul, but like you're also supposed to love him. You know what I mean? You're also supposed to feel a connection to people who are, without, the or I should say emotionally stunted or emotionally you know um kept kept back through no fault of their own. It's different if you're just like, I
Mhm.
don't like women and I that's how I am since I was 11. That's different. It's the, you can see him like talking to Yord. Don't let fear affect your judgment. He understands these things. He just hasn't internalized them. He just hasn't applied them to his own life. But he wants his Padawans to succeed. He wants the Jedi to survive and the Jedi to be the bastions of good. But he doesn't see himself as a part of the problem. He just sees himself as uh, like what he's going through is something he can overcome, because it's obvious that the Jedi don't, focus in on, how are you feeling today and do you need, somebody to talk to. He's trying to save himself through saving May, through saving Osha, through saving the Coven. And you're supposed to feel bad for somebody like that, not somebody who's, just malicious and evil for no reason. He's trying to fix a broken thing, but he can't identify what's broken. He doesn't see it
Mhm.
as the Jedi are broken. He sees it, I've got to fix the world around me, and
He thinks
that's
he's doing
his
what's
goal.
right.
Exactly. For the entire time. Even when he says, Osha, it's okay, he thinks he's giving her power. You
It's
have
crazy.
nothing. And you are nothing to the greater idea of the institution, which is why Indar, excuse me, which is why Vernestra, had a private burial and then lied to keep the institution going. You are just
Mm.
fodder for them. And he really does think that he's on a mission of good. I keep going back to that. This is a noble mission. Like
Right.
we're supposed to be doing this as the Jedi. We're supposed to be the protectors. And he just doesn't get that he is the broken. He is the problem. He is where the issue lies. And he just continues to try to, massage that over by being like, oh, well, have faith in me. For what?
Right.
For what, sir?
Right.
Like, what do I need faith in you? What is it that you have done? You know, and it's that constant, like when she says, you are no longer my master, and his face pulls up like, hold up, what do you mean?
Mhm.
Like that moment right there should have told you right away that he is wrong. Everything he's doing is wrong, because he still
Please right
sees
there.
her as a child. He still sees her as somebody he has a thumb on. And that's where you needed to find your problem with Soul. But again,
Mhm.
he's supposed to be a character that you feel, sad for, because he really just does want to do the right thing. He just doesn't know that he's the wrong in the world.
And
Hmm.
it is sad because in a way, like for lack of a better phrase, he sort of becomes a cog in the wheel of the Jedi Council, at least locally for them. But at the same time, I mean, like Vernestra has, she emphasizes his importance, and from beginning she's like, we don't need you to die on a field mission. Well, he does,
Hmm.
but I mean, he's and it's really her fault in
It
a
is.
way, because she kept telling him to stay, and then eventually, I mean, like, I'm not just trying to point the blame on her, but like she tried to get him to stay and he insisted on leaving and she let
It's
him.
her
And
fault.
yeah, I mean, both of them share the blame, but yeah. And then but it's like from jump,
Hmm.
Soul's Soul was his he was clouded. His mind was clouded since the Brendock mission. Like as soon as, like, for his whole concept in his mind to be like, we're looking for a virgin while he stuffs his face with the Nuna leg or whatever. It's
Hmm.
like that was it for him. He was like, the virgins, and that became his goal literally till the end of the show. So his mind was already clouded. There was no unclouding it after that. Once he saw the twins, it was done. It was done. So
Mm.
there was no unclouding it. It was a done deal. He's sitting there about to die and he's still like, oh, but I have you both here so I can totally prove the virgins and it'll be fine. Everything I did will have been worth it because I can prove the virgins through you. And they're just like, are you serious?
So abusive.
Yeah.
Like
So
no awareness of how you're impacting these people. What's gonna happen? Like, okay, you prove the virgins, then what? I imagine the Jedi would just like kill them or something.
I don't know what
Yeah,
they were
exactly.
gonna do, but if they felt entitled, they would have just, you know, kept them in custody like before.
Right,
The Jedi have a right to train children. Like, no,
right,
who said that?
right.
They're not even in the Republic. Who said that?
Exactly. I do want to go to a point about JC did some extensive research on the names in the Acolyte. Let's see if I can pull this up without blocking the YouTube channel. Oh my God. Sorry, you guys listening on YouTube. Okay. Um, so let's see here. So, JC, I'm gonna read off a little bit of this. We have Varosha, which could mean Osha in Arabic, long life, in Sanskrit, burning and shining. Um, Oja in Sanskrit, to live and be strong, light. May might be an alternate spelling to May or Mary. May in Norse, motherhood, renewal, and fertility. Hebrew roots, beloved, rebellious. Japanese roots, before, as in what came before.
Ooh,
Uh, let's see. Khmer, which
Ooh.
was Khmer, which was a big topic of conversation on the timeline for a while, was Khmer and Seoul, because Khmer, there's an Arabic name, Kamar, which is moon or moonlight. And we all know Seoul because we're familiar with Latin pretty much. Seoul is connected with the sun. So that's a pretty fascinating connection that these two men that are polar opposites in Osha's life would have those two symbolic names. Um, and then just to finish off, Jord might be connected to Norse or German roots, meaning earth or farmer. Jeki, didn't find much there. Anasaea could have Greek origins like unequal, or Hebrew origins like Ania, gracious or merciful. And there was a Saint Anicia who was a historical figure who was persecuted and murdered for being Christian. All
ooh,
right,
interesting, interesting.
I think I got all of that. out.
Can we look up?
Uh,
Can somebody look up Jackie? Just curious because of the similarity.
yeah. JC, do you have any comments on that? This is all his notes
Yeah.
I was reading off of.
I didn't find anything from Jackie. Uh, there was some stuff about Jack, but it was really just there wasn't much. I didn't find much meaning behind it.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, there wasn't much there for Jackie. I don't know. You know, there could be something that I'm not finding. Like I did some. This is just from stuff that I've read. In the months since the show, online and in books. You know, so yeah, it's just kind of a compilation of some stuff that I found and thought was interesting, for sure. Uh, there's a lot there. Definitely the Soul and Chimere. Having the sun and moon thing. I can't take credit for the connection to Kamar. That was all over the internet back when the show was on. Um, but I think it's really interesting the symbolism of the two having the sun and the moon. Um, like I was super interested in that Padawan in episode 1 when Soul's talking about the fire, and I think a lot of people kind of assumed that once we finished the show that she was talking about the Brendock fire. She was seeing the Brendock fire, right? But for me, I think she was clocking Soul, because like his whole character is about how like his decisions have consequences for others, and like his motives, end up causing a lot of problems. The Coven dies. The other Jedi that are on him with the mission go into various degrees of personal turmoil. His whole team dies on Kofar. Um,
Mhm.
the whole thing. So I think that Soul's name is deliberate symbolism for his character because like yes, he's a source of light, but he also, like the Padawan says, he's a great fire that consumes everything he touches. And then contrasting that with Chimere, being a reference to the moon. Symbolically, the moon is also a source of light. And so I think it's interesting that they both have names like that because they're both sort of a guiding light for Osha, right? They both end up being her masters at different points in time. So I think that was deliberate for sure. Them being the sun and the moon like that, and then you think about what the moon's light. It's reflecting the sun's light, right? So like that's Chimere only exists because of something that happened with the Jedi, right? And then also he's only so attractive to Osha because of the Jedi and what they do to her. you know so I definitely think the symbolism of their names is super deliberate. It gets a little looser with Osha and May, but I definitely think that Soul and Chimere um, was deliberate.
There's
Talk about their names,
oh, go ahead. Uh-huh.
Soul and Khmer. So I'm an astrology girly, so that's where I'm coming from.
Nice.
So when you look at your birth chart, right, your sun sign and your moon sign mean different things. So soul obviously means sun, right? So your sun sign is more about your ego, how you present to the world. So when I think of soul, I think of a person that, and I also think of ego as armor for like your mushy inner self, right? It's the thing that we present to the world, it protects us. So when I think of soul, I think of this veneer that he's created as this upstanding Jedi, but we can clearly see all of the conflicting emotions and quote unquote bad things right under the surface for him. So I think of him as a representation of ego. When you think about Khmer and that meaning moon, your moon sign is more of your like emotional center. And so we see Khmer's role in Osha's life as him pulling those repressed emotions out of her. And that's where she's going to get her power from. So that's how I see their name, the significance of their names. But obviously, it's just from astrology because that's what I'm into. But
Well, that's super good. I love it.
I
I
agree.
like
That's some
that
really good
too.
thinking.
Yeah, and you can see the connection, in their characters, and that's when I was looking through this stuff. That's how I kind of dialed down, because there's a lot of different origins sometimes for these. Particularly Osha's name, there was a lot of different stuff out there. But you can kind of dial it down by what makes sense to the character, and what you can kind of think that Leslie may have intended. And I think also I started dialing in more on the Latin and Arabic stuff, because of that's the roots that Sol and Chimere's names came from. So I kind of dialed down on those when I was thinking about May and Osha and Anastaea's names.
I think I was just gonna say I think that's really great, and even to Freckles' point, I like those um explanations because they still kind of center Osha at the middle, because they in that way Soul and Chimere's role is still in reflecting what Osha knows about herself or what she doesn't know about herself. It puts her at the middle, and as she should be, and allows her as a character to change while other characters orbit around her, or maybe even she orbits around other characters. It allows her to change, and of course then that makes me think of the ocean, which then we get back into celestial things. So I really really like that. I really really like that. Ocean, moon, all that stuff. Yeah, yeah.
I also have a thought about that. I listen to a ton of Japanese music, or I used to. I have my favorite artists now. I don't really listen to new guys, but listen to a ton of Japanese music. There's one J rock artist named Gakuto, who was in Malice Miser. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the what do they call it, Lolitas and all those, like the gothic. So Malice Miser was very gothic, and Lolita, Mana, so cute. And Gakuto was the lead singer. And then he went solo, and so he created his own thing. And he always says this thing about the sun and the moon that's really interesting to me, because people will say, like, which one do you think is more important? And he says, like, okay, well, everyone would say that the sun would be the most important because it's like super bright. And if you're looking for a person, you want another person to be the sun. You want them to be shining on you and filling you with energy. But he's like, I would prefer to be the moon because I want to be that person that's going to guide someone through the darkness when you don't really have anything around and it's hard to know where you want to be. And I just think that that that's also, when I think about this with the names, it also kind of applies to Osha for me, who was very much lost in the dark of her own feelings and emotions, and she needed something to guide her out. And in that same way, like Gakuto kind of talks about, okay, the sun is like can be like overwhelming and it's like shining on your face. Like she can't see herself when Soul is there shining in her face, right? But when she gets away from him, and then Camille kind of like gently leads her to her center, then she's finally able to connect with her true self. So I thought that that applied too, for sure.
Especially when he's like, "That's your strength in the Force, Osha." Like
Right.
that should it's something that should be obvious to her, but it's not, because she's been not well controlled by Soul, but she's also been, given just only so much room to grow,
Mhm.
only so much room to explore herself. And it's just because of Chimere being, I love Freckles, I think you said it, like the emotional, I'm the one that brings it out, the emotional part.
Mhm.
That's exactly all he is for her, is just an emotional soundboard. And just for her to understand herself, why she is experiencing these feelings of, you know, anger towards Soul but not able to express it,
Mhm.
anger towards her sister but not able to express it. He's giving her that out, and Leslie said that, like,
Mhm.
he's supposed to be the one that gives her the ability to release herself, where release the parts of herself that she's afraid to.
Oh, did we lose her? Tipe, we
Oh, I
kind
put
of
myself
lost
on
you.
mute on purpose.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, my bad. Oh my God, I hope you got like all of that. But
We
yeah,
lost
I was
the
just
end.
saying
We
that.
lost the end.
Okay. That was on purpose. I muted myself on purpose.
Okay.
My bad.
Okay.
Dipping out now.
Okay. No worries. It's all good, and that was good. I love it. I do want to pause if anyone listening has any comments, questions, you want to jump in and like leave a comment, you can request to speak. If you want to share your comment, if you want to share your question, you can leave a tweet also. You can leave a comment on the YouTube chat. If you're listening on YouTube, I see a couple of you there. And we will engage with your comments and your questions there, or any of our speakers on the panel before I move on to a new topic. Anything that came up earlier that you wanted to touch back on?
I did want to say one more thing about the names. Well, actually, two things. I thought it was really interesting that she chose to make the prefix on OSHA's name Ver, because that's representative of the truth.
Mm.
That mean anything like. So her whole quest is kind of in search of the truth. It's being hidden
Mhm.
from her. So I thought that was a really interesting choice. And then something I thought was really interesting when I was looking up May's name. There's not a lot there. Like I said, I do think, you know, given what I'm looking at, I think that May is supposed to, I do think the motherhood thing is and the renewal thing struck me, because I think she's intended to ascend. She completed the ascension, right? So
Mhm.
she's intended to ascend to be the mother of the coven. Um, but there wasn't a lot there about her name. But I did think that it was really interesting. I found something about the Puranas, which is a Hindu text, and that one of them has this whole metaphorical thing about like emotions and where they come from. Um, and Maya is deceit, and she is uh, she has a twin sister in the
Mm.
Puranas, who is Vedana, uh,
Mm.
who is torture. And
Oh
they
wow.
are down the line from a Dharma, which is like the ultimate evil, like the anti side. And then there's
Goodness.
Dharma, which is like like the Hindu version of like the life force,
Sure.
kind of, um, like the ultimate
Or isn't
wisdom.
Dharma's more like fate, I think.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate wisdom. It's like like kind of the movement of of life, forward. Yeah, and then
Mm.
there's a whole Dharma side too. And he has a daughter. Dharma marries a bunch of people and has a bunch of daughters. And one of the
Mm.
daughters is actually named Santosha, um,
Oh wow.
which it means contentment. So I thought that was really interesting that they're both kind of loosely referenced in those texts. Um,
Mm.
and I haven't had a lot of time to like dive into it and really like dive, you know, be able to talk about it really intelligently. But I did think it was really interesting. And also what they represent, in the text. Like I said, Santosha represents contentment, which is, interesting to think about in the context of OSHA. And then
Mm.
Maya represents deceit, which is kind of interesting to think about in the context of May. So I just thought it was really interesting. And then Maya also has a twin sister. So it just jumped out at me. I was like, what, this is weird.
Mm.
Kind of too weird to be coincidental, but it could totally be. But like I said, I haven't really dived into it too much, but I just thought it was interesting.
Mm. That is interesting. Yes,
I have
thank you
one
for
thing
sharing that.
about May's
Yeah.
name because I was thinking about it when you said it. It means like renewal, rebirth, or fertility, the whole motherhood thing. So when I think about May, and I talked about this a little bit on Blue Sky after last week's
Mm.
space, but to me, May is the most representative out of all the characters of like Black Americans in the diaspora.
Mm.
So when we meet her, she identifies as a coven witch, right? But if
Mhm.
you think about it, her last memory of the coven was when she was like 8. So
Mhm.
she's still very far removed from this culture that she ascribes to. And
Mm.
so what we see of her is kind of her piecing this culture back together from memory and living it, right?
Mm.
And that's what we do from like our African roots. Like we only
Sure.
know what we know, so we put this black culture together and we're rocking it, right? And
Right.
so when I think about her name and meaning like renewal, rebirth, all this stuff, the culture of that coven sits with her because OSHA didn't identify with it really. So she will be the future of this coven.
Mm.
So she will renew this coven. In my head canon, that is going to be the end of
Sure.
their story, is that they're going to rebuild the coven.
I
And
would love that.
yeah, that's what I immediately thought of when I heard what her name means.
Yeah,
Mm.
no, and I totally agree. That's what it immediately jumped out at me too, because it's like the goddess May is, that's the whole thing, like she's the great mother, you know. So yeah, I that's they jumped out at me too, totally. And I
Mm.
agree. I think that's May's destiny is to, she was the one who ascended. I think it's May's destiny to rebuild the coven.
Mm.
And I was looking at her name too, just her full name being Mayho, and I thought that there might be some Korean influence. Somebody who speaks Korean could tell me. I don't know for sure, but just from what I could find, the ho being the second syllable in a given name, there's some different definitions, but one of them is household.
Mm.
Another is heroic. Another is to protect. So I feel like those could be related if there's a connection there.
Interesting.
I think that's cool.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I would love. I don't really know a lot about Korean names, but it's just really interesting to me as well. I don't, but I know nothing about it. So that would be something to research for sure. Look into that for those of us outside of Korean culture who have no clue what's
Yeah,
going on.
because I don't know if those definitions or those meanings, I should say, would be applied to her name the same way.
Sure.
But that's what I found just by itself.
Mm, awesome. So our last topic, still kind of forming my mind around this, but when I asked myself a little bit earlier, what do I think that the show, the overarching theme, symbolism of the show would be? It has so many amazing layers. Like there's so we could go on for days, and we have been doing that for months, really, about all the layers in this show. It has so many layers and so many interpretations, and they're all valid. And I'm not saying anyone is invalid. Some of them I ascribe to more than my own. But if I was going to say, for me personally, I would say the show is probably about like childhood versus womanhood, and especially with the dichotomy between Osha and May. That Osha starts off very soft spoken and very obedient, and just yes sir, no sir, and kind of darting her eyes and not really trying to be in the way. But, she has her own sense of self, but she believes in the Jedi. She knows the Jedi are true. And, well, okay, have fun on the prison ship, Jedi killer. She's not going to rock a boat. She's not going to mess things up. May is the big polar opposite at the beginning, super brash, fully in her power, orders people around. Hey, Jedi, we're going to fight right now. And doesn't give them a choice. Complete opposite of where Osha is at the beginning. Um, but there's this journey for each of them, especially for Osha, to finally abandon her childhood, which a lot of adults don't even fully ever do, right? It's a journey. It's something that we have to do kind of consciously. It's something we have to say, like, hey, I'm not going to let these old things from my past control me anymore. And Osha's all about being controlled as a character. That's her entire thing, pretty much. It's interesting that they fight as children, accept each other as adult sisters. That's very difficult. If you have siblings, that's a whole transition on its own, right? Your adult relationship versus your childhood relationship. And Osha's parents, quote unquote parents, both die. One by her hand directly. So, do you have any thoughts about Osha's journey from childhood to womanhood, or May's journey from womanhood to childhood? Because she's left at the age of 8, and like emotionally, when we leave her off.
I mean, I'm not the one to speak on this, so I hope somebody will jump in here. But I think it was deliberate that a black female was cast in the role, because
Mm,
it's very very true to what you guys, or what has been described to me that you guys experience. You know,
mm,
so I definitely think that was a deliberate choice because yeah, like it's OSHA is repressed and uh, you know ripped from her
mm-hmm,
home at an early age, and May too. May is ripped from her home at an early age too by
mm,
the the dominant power in the universe. And then forced to act a certain way and told that that's the right way. And that's you know definitely seems like it's something that speaks true to that kind of experience.
mm, mm-hmm. Appreciate that, JC, for sure.
Yeah, I love Osha's journey so much because, like you said, it was very relatable as a Black woman navigating this world because you see, and I've talked about this a lot, but one of my favorite aspects of it is she becomes free by leaning into all of the things that they tell you you should let go of, like all of her anger,
Mm-hmm,
all of those quote unquote negative emotions. Her freedom is just on the other side of that. And I think that's
mm-hmm.
such an important message, not just for Black women, but like adults in general, because a lot of people are living avoiding their childhood trauma because it's hard.
Yes,
And it's not only
yes,
hard, sometimes it's expensive to get the help you need to get through that stuff.
it's
So
expensive.
our
Yeah,
our actions as adults 9 times out of 10 can be traced back to your childhood. So it's a
absolutely.
very important point that all of this trauma happens to them when they're 8 and they don't solve it until 16 years later. And when I say solve it, I mean start to solve it. Like this is obviously going to
Yeah.
be a journey, but that first big step doesn't happen until 16 years later. And I think a lot of adults
Mm,
can relate to that.
mm,
I also
I
think that like
definitely. Oh,
while
sorry.
May is still set, she gets reset back to age 8 or whatever, essentially.
mm-hmm.
I think what's gonna break them a little bit is the Jedi are gonna try to do what they did to Osha, and it's not gonna work on May because they are different.
Mm. Yes, 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 yes. They're different people. Absolutely.
And
Yes, yeah, that
May
is
don't play that.
interesting.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think they're gonna be unpleasantly surprised with the results that they get from May, and it's not gonna
Yeah,
be like the good little "I want to be a Jedi" that they got from Osha.
yeah,
So
yeah. That is
Yeah.
interesting.
and
I
Osha
mean,
and May
adult
also
May.
saw more of the
Oh,
actual truth than Osha because May saw Soul murder their mom. Osha didn't see any of it. So
Right,
it was much easier to like
right.
program her.
Mm,
yeah. And adult May with 8-year-old memories still remembers exactly how she was raised to be,
Exactly.
and exactly how she was trained, and exactly
mm-hmm.
how Mother Coral told her to get
Exactly.
angry when she needed to.
Oh,
So
well,
yeah,
yeah.
that's yeah. They not. And I would even add like I feel like as children, OSHA was probably like it seems from what we see on screen that
Mm,
OSHA was really probably more I don't know what the correct term would be. I was thinking cold, but only because like she wanted her independence. So when
mm,
we see her in episode 7, she's like, I want to be by myself. May, why you
right,
always follow me around? Why don't you leave me alone? Why you want to see what's in my sketchbook? Can I have my own things? Like it's like
right,
she's not really, and that's just a piece of her that we see, but she's not really trying to be like, oh sweet summer child. And then
right.
May is like, you're my family, I love you, so I want to share things with you. When you
Mm,
leave, I know you're here because I want to spend time with you. When you do
mm-hmm,
something, I want to do something. When somebody
mm-hmm.
tries to attack you, you get behind me and I step up because I want to protect you. So you see
Right.
this different part of them when they're kids, which is immediately skewed by the Jedi, who then
Mm,
control the narrative. And then
mm,
once we get to episode five, six, seven, five, six, and eight, we see them kind of shifting back to kind of the way that that specific characterization of them from when they were children.
mhm,
So I don't know what that means for them, but I do like that kind of in a way they they come full circle to each other. They orbit each other, they eclipse each other, but in some ways they kind of come back to who they were as children.
mhm.
But maybe this is a second chance for them to not go. It is a second chance for them actually to not go the
Yeah.
same direction, because even May says, I tried to stop you from leaving. I'm not going to do that this time. What do you
Mm,
want? You make the choice.
mhm.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah,
It's also
that's part
yeah.
of what precipitated everything too, so she's not going to make the same mistake twice. Whereas
Mm,
Soul absolutely, powered ahead to make the same mistake over and over again.
Right.
mm,
Right.
I think it's also, and I'm really glad you brought this up, Tara, because like I think it's so important where the show ended is because we know that May, or we can assume that May's childhood was forever changed after that moment that they were 8, and obviously
right.
a completely separate way from Osha. Even though Osha was taken to the Jedi, she still was probably allowed to be a child. She was probably still
Yeah.
allowed to grow up into herself. Whereas May had to honestly become a completely different person and probably have to survive a lot of things that we need to know what happened, but like a lot of things that we can't
Yeah.
imagine anyone at 8 years old ever going through. So I think it's
Yeah.
so important that how Leslie got us to the place that we are. We do see Osha become a woman. We do see May revert back to the child, because maybe that's
Mhm.
what they need to heal. Like I keep thinking about like how Yord
Mm,
like was telling Osha, like, May is your
mhm.
biggest wound. Well, you didn't even know I had a sister, so how did you know I had a wound? Because it's something
Yeah.
that was identifiable about yourself at that time, and now it all makes sense. And so I think that
Mm,
what Leslie was trying to do by ending it the way that she did, obviously on a cliffhanger, but also try to bring us back to the point where like this is where the moment that changed them forever. Now they get a chance to
mhm.
redo it, and now we get to see what they would have done if they had
Mm,
been given the chance to do, or to exist in the way that they wanted to.
I
mhm.
fully agree with that. And yeah, I think that it's like if you were to ask, like, well, why did she have to lose her memories? Well, I think
Mm,
that's why. And I kind of touched on that in my thread about how Soul and May are both sort of on these paths of redemption, but
mhm.
Soul never finds that redemption,
Mhm.
and May reaches it, but then immediately loses her memories. I think that was definitely, something that we probably would see, because there's something specific about her being sent right back to that moment, that
Mm,
night on Brendock specifically, but having no recollection of a sister, and all the people that she would have held a grudge against are dead already. So what does she
right.
do? She can't go seek revenge again. So what does she do?
Right.
And I want to see that. I want to see what she would do. And
Yeah.
given the fact that Vanessa probably knows, or maybe she doesn't, but she's gonna soon find out that she can't mold May the way that um Osha was molded. So
True.
I mean, where does that put her character? Um,
Absolutely.
Carrying this hurt and this childhood trauma as an 8-year old, and there's nowhere for it to go. You
Mhm.
can't enact justice or revenge. You
Mhm.
don't know. You keep saying, "Oh, there's someone I need to tell," but you don't know who that person is anymore. What does that
Right.
mean for May? That leaves her with just herself. No
Mhm.
sister, just herself. And
Mm,
I mean, before she even knew Osha was still alive, it was kind of like that. So but she had somewhere for her feelings to go, which was driving her to seek out those Jedi. So
Right.
I'm really curious. I really need to see what's gonna happen.
and
Me too.
that completes the turn, like you were mentioning earlier. I think we talked about this in previous spaces, how their arcs sort of orbit each other, and they end up opposite each other, and that completes
Hmm.
the term right there, the turn right there for May, because when we first see Osha, she has the unresolved, not just unresolved trauma, but unresolvable trauma, because
That's
she
true.
thinks that May's gone, dead and gone, so there's nothing she can do.
Mhm.
And then
Right.
now May is the one who has the unresolvable trauma, because like you said, everybody's gone, like she has no memory of
Mhm.
her sister. Everybody who was involved is dead. Her whole family's dead, like everything, she's never going to be able to get over that. She's never going to be able to process that. And now she's stuck with the
Mhm.
Jedi, right back where Osha was when we first, well, not when we first meet Osha, but where Osha was when, everything happened, you know.
Mhm.
Right. That's a good point. I do wonder if she will slowly start to remember Chimere, but as her master, as Renestra is like telling her, "Oh, he used to be
Mhm.
my Padawan," and that might bring up some anger for her
Hopefully.
that she'll direct at him. But you know, I want them
I
to
need
write
her to
it
get,
so I can see.
yeah. I need her to get her memories back. I want to come back to that point that Sith Babe was talking about, because I was gonna say something similar, but I hadn't made that connection that she did. Um, where I when you were talking, Zay, and talking about uh May May witnessing witnessing the murder of her mother. I think it was you, Zay. It might have been Freckles. Sorry.
I don't think it was me. I think it was
Oh,
Freckles.
okay, it was Freckles. Sorry. I'm doing a million things. I'm trying to manage this YouTube thing and pay attention
It's
to
all
this.
good.
I got y'all mixed up in my memory. But so the point about May witnessing the murder of her mother, and that must have made her, grow up really fast, that she's going to lose her childhood pretty much immediately, because that is something that makes you lose your childhood. Osho was shielded from it, and May was thrust into the deep end in that way. And so Sith Babe, you making that connection with that May's healing is to return to being eight. That's super significant for me, I think, um, just because she's been traumatized, very deeply traumatized, and she deserves a do-over for her horrible childhood, and how that started, that kicked off with her becoming an assassin, and who knows what she's been through, right? Terrible things.
And this is one of
Um,
the, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean over too. Go ahead.
no, that was it. That was it.
I was just gonna say, like, this is one of the things that's supposed to be what film does, because obviously, like in real life, we don't get a chance to go back, and we don't get a chance to, change, the effects, or the moments of our lives that, create who we become. And that's what this show, like, is really trying to give us. It's trying to give us like a story from all angles, and a place to put, like, a lot of these unresolved feelings. It's okay to not have all of the answers at one point of your in your life. It's okay not
Mhm.
to forgive the people who do the most damage to you, even though
Right,
they love you, quote quote, or they're close to you, or they're somebody who you've been told is, somebody who loves you. And I think that that's so important,
right.
that as the audience we have somewhere to offload that, because like you said earlier, we're all angry. We're all walking around with all this unresolved, unaffordable trauma that we can't, just like take.
Yeah,
If we unload on somebody, that can cause so much damage. And that's also what I love when Amanda talks about, like, we're trying to tell these stories in space, but we're trying to tell these stories that are still real and still can be accessible and understood by people who are not in space. Well, I guess we are in space, but like not in space.
we are in
we
space, aren't
are in
we?
space. Yeah, like I mean, we're here. So I just mean, like, this is what this show should be, and what it is for a lot of people is just it is watching somebody have, you know, really hard things to deal with, and
Mm.
seeing what happens when they go down that path, or seeing what happens, you know, when they choose forgiveness. I love that Leslie like hated the fact that Luke forgave Vader, because I kind of did too for a really
Oh,
long
I
time.
did not know that. Is that true?
I'll send you the link to the article, but like
Yeah, I need it.
yeah, she was basically like, it's not always going to be something you can get over, like that somebody
Right.
does to you, and it's okay to, you know, not.
That kind of brings it back to the Steven Universe meme too, right?
Yep.
Of like you can't always forgive the the person that's murdered half the universe, Steven. Sometimes you have to just kill that guy.
Exactly that. And it's such like a, especially women and especially black people, like I feel like we're
Mhm.
always told like, you know,
Mm.
you just got to be, it's in the past, and you just got to find a way to get over it, and you know, it's just like, you know,
Mm.
you can't let your hatred control you, and it's like, no, 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 you can't, because some people deserve to have your ire. Some people deserve to have your loathing, and it doesn't have to be
Mhm.
like, you know, you don't want them to exist. Like it can in OSHA's case, but it
Mm.
can also be a situation where it's like you can separate yourself from that, and it doesn't have
Mm.
to be who you are anymore. And I think that's why she connected a lot with Ahsoka, because again, when you're
Mm.
told that this is the only thing you can be and what you can do with your life, and you completely
Mm.
reject that, it doesn't have to
Mm.
be a situation where you're like, well, I don't want all religion to exist because I'm rejecting this. No, it can just be, I separated myself for my own happiness.
Mhm. Hmm. That healthy selfishness,
Exactly.
which we all need. We all need to make sure we have our boundaries. You know? Huh. Um, for the last bit, just because I'm still feeling like you know, we're at 7:30 Eastern time, but I'm still feeling there's stuff in the air, so I'm just gonna keep going. For the last of it, I want to come back to kind of where we started off at, with that freedom and conformity. Now that we've brought in this stuff about children and adulthood and womanhood, um, you know, so I made this note based on your notes, Sith Babe, that May remains loyal to the Coven, and Osha abandons the Coven's teachings for the Jedi Order. And of course, then later Osha leaves the Jedi, and well, May still has the Coven inside of her. But it's interesting to compare them both in terms of that, in terms of like the Jedi being so controlling, but Osha abandoning the Coven for the Jedi was an act of freedom at the same time. So that's a weird dichotomy there. Um, Whereas May was staying loyal to her family, to this place where she could fully be herself, and then she gets thrust into like even more anarchy. That's a little bit more controlling, right? Because the stranger is very domineering over her, in a way that she clearly resents him for. She wants to get away from him. She doesn't want to stay around him. So the show definitely also has those themes too of the independence, control, freedom, conformity. Who do you stay loyal to? Who do you free yourself from? And where is the line where you can be independent, but still live a good life for yourself that isn't like totally self-destructive?
And it's just yet another way that Leslie has written exactly like you said, a dichotomy into the writing, because
Hmm.
it's you know, like exactly like you said, like yeah, OSHA is technically, you know, going out and claiming her freedom, taking control of her destiny, but then she's not, you know.
Right.
So Leslie's just badass.
Her mind.
I
Yeah,
Leslie
Leslie,
maybe.
your
gave
mind.
us the answer to that question in the last episode. So
Mm,
if you look at just how the power kind of transfers throughout the episode, May's
mm,
moment of power and probably her only moment of real power in the series is when
mhm.
Kamir's like telling her, kill him, do it, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, I'm going to get a confession because that's going to free me from
Right,
what actually matters is my sister thinking I did this stuff. So when she
right.
rejects everybody and finds her own answer, her own path, that's when
Mhm,
she has her moment of true freedom and power. And I think that was hers. But what we would have gotten in the subsequent seasons is kind of Osha sitting in this partnership with Kamir where maybe it's a little too much of him and like
mm,
her eventual path being some kind of middle ground.
mhm,
So I think the answer is always like it's not in the institution being, and I'm counting the coven as an institution as well. It's a quote unquote,
mm,
but it is still a place that you are relying on for your identity. And so
mhm.
I think that the answer is the middle ground for both.
I love that. Yeah, for sure. And I love that point about it's a place where you get your identity from. And it's hard. Maybe that's what Osha was ultimately rebelling against, that she was just unable to form an identity
Exactly. It
there.
speaks to the power of perspective, right? Because
Mm,
to May, this is her home. This is a place where she felt most like herself, and to Osha, it's the complete opposite. And then we see
mhm.
that switch with the Jedi. So,
Right.
and I think it goes back to the main point, even with like creating these lovable characters who are parts of these institutions that make us hate their actions. And
Mhm,
like we look at Soul, we like Soul on like a connection level, but we still
yeah.
recognize that his actions are bad. But because we are connected to Soul, we can see that the issue is the institution. And so I think
Mhm,
the overall criticism is in the institution in both of them. And it's not
mhm,
that again the coven is a bad institution, but it's an
mm,
institution that 100 years from now could be similar to the Jedi, because when
mhm,
you have a system of belief and you have people that strongly believe in this system, it
mhm,
can turn into something that it was not intended to be. Which again, look at the
mhm.
Jedi. Like I'm, it started
Absolutely.
good, but thousands of years later, when they have power and numbers and all these things, it's turned into
Right.
that I'm sure the original Jedi would be like, oh, hold up, this is not what we meant. Not like
Right.
that.
Oh, hold up. I love that.
Well, and Leslie uses the characters to show it too, because
Uh-huh.
Yord's whole character is about, basically he's an illustration of exactly what we're talking about, of
Mm,
people choosing to substitute the order's judgment for their own kind of. And so I think a lot of people have complained about the character writing out there. I don't
sure.
see it, because
Me
each
neither.
character serves an illustrative point,
Yeah.
in the narrative. And all the Jedi serve a purpose to show like how the Order is and how it treats people. Because Torben too. Torben
Mm,
is totally meant to show like the effect that the Jedi can have on young kids. And
yeah.
so like each character, no character is irrelevant. And I think that's another part of the genius of the writing too, because like Leslie uses the characters to show us like how the Jedi flex their power, and it's the beginnings of the separate. I don't know if it's the beginnings, but it's early roots of the separatist movement, because
Right.
it's what turns people off to the Jedi. You
It's
know.
too institutionalized. It's too removed from, what actually helps people, what's actually working for people. Definitely. Have to agree with that. Any last points, since I've gone a little bit over, any last points y'all want to make? Great discussion today, as always. Everyone is so smart. I love it. We have these amazing discussions. And the trolls just can't get with it. I think I agree with someone said, or maybe it was me. I can't remember. Someone said in some previous space that the trolls are just not smart enough to like get this series, which seems to be the case. It doesn't seem that difficult to understand, and it has a whole bunch of layers if you do want to look into it. But if you can't even if you can't even stay with it long enough to look at it for the surface, then might be a skills issue, bud. Might be a skills issue.
I mean, I
Yes.
always have something to say about this, but like it's almost like a disservice to just like the medium of television,
Mm,
because to say that like this show doesn't have or has bad writing or the pacing is off, like okay, those are criticisms. I don't know how valid they are because they all seem like those are like personal like
very
preference issues.
personal. Yeah.
But like just when you think about like what shows are supposed to like do, like again, like I don't mean to like criticize like Andor or Skeleton Crew or anything like that because
Or
I love all of Star Wars, and once Disney gets its act together, I'll go ahead and watch those other things too. But
right.
it's really just about like why are we so content with like television that doesn't challenge us anymore, or television that doesn't like give us something new to experience that's outside of ourselves. Like just thinking about like the Twitter spaces that we've had, just like the conversations, you
Hmm.
hear so much that people just get themselves personally from the story. it's
Yeah.
it's really beautiful, and it's like you could experience that too, but you decide to close yourself off to these things because it's just easier to let somebody tell you, okay, that's the bad guy, that's the good guy. There's no in between for any of them, as if people aren't multi-layered or multi-dimensional, or don't have moments of great triumph and moments of great failure. And it's like, even with Soul, like, yeah, he's not obviously the good guy. Like, you're supposed to get that right away. But again, you're supposed to see, people who are lost in that person, people who are devout, and people who are, have thrown themselves into this belief, and they don't know why they do it. So that's why they rebel against it. But what they don't realize is that they're rebelling against, you know, changing it, losing themselves to what it is that they're about to become through this
Mm,
institution. And I just feel like because we've been so indoctrinated between, this is okay and this is not, and you know, everything should be, in a nice, neat little package. Like I had a conversation with somebody today. Compartmentalization will drive you crazy, and it will destroy you if you
mm,
can't come to different points of different things in an accepting and understanding way. You're just you're gonna end up destroyed at the end.
mhm,
I think that the story, I think people weren't ready for something that was not strictly um good versus bad, because that's what Star Wars has kind of been the whole time. And I did see people say that. They're like, "Well, this is Star Wars is supposed to be good versus evil," and I haven't seen. And
right.
look, please, like, calm down. Like, first of
Right.
all, I get it. I get it. I understand if George Lucas wanted to make it very strictly good versus evil. He did that. Go watch those movies. Have a great time. But you can't sit here and just be mad because this show is offering you something different. She told you a billion times before and after the show came out that
Mm,
this is meant to make you question those things. It is meant to make you ask and confront. Well, maybe somebody could have a little bit more good than we think, or they might have good intentions and still do bad things. Like, it's okay. I feel like social media doesn't make that easier because for a while, some stuff was being blown out of proportion. Some people
yes.
were just being completely written off.
Yes.
And I think we were slowly starting to ease into like giving people a little bit of grace. And
Mhm,
it's not so much that the story is about giving people grace, but it's about realizing there is a lot of overlap and there are a lot of nuances, and several things can and will be true at the same time. You
Mm,
have to be willing to sit down and parse those things out instead of just saying this is good, this is bad. It's written into the story. The Jedi are good, the Jedi are bad. It's That's
mhm,
not what it's about. Like it's literally about being able to say these things are have multiple layers to them.
mhm.
You're peeling away the petals of he loves me not, and you have to actually be able to sit there and say, okay, there are a lot of factors here. What does that mean? How does
Mhm.
that impact somebody? How
Mhm.
does that impact the characters? What are their motivations? And how do these different elements overlap or interact with each other? But people are
Yes.
not ready for that because that means, yeah, they have to think a little bit more. I'm not trying to look. I definitely think it's a skill issue. I'm not one of
It-
those people. I'm not one of those people who tries to say, "Well, you just didn't get it." It's you have to be highly
Right.
intellectual to understand this piece of masterpiece. Like I'm not gonna say that to you because I feel like everybody has the capability to understand this show, but you
Yes.
have to want to. And if you
Yes.
don't want to, I can't help you. That is
Yes.
the skill issue.
Yes.
The skill of wanting knowledge. Don't be so comfortable to slip into this routine that people are pushing now where you don't use your brain. You need to
Mhm.
reject that and reject it quickly before you
Yeah.
end up somewhere where you shouldn't be. That's very dangerous.
And
It's very dangerous.
what's also funny is, people, a lot of those same guys mostly will talk about how Andor is great and Rogue One are great because they're more like quote unquote like realistic. By realistic they mean like, gritty, there's no lightsabers and there's more like graphic death. That's what I always think personally. It's like when you say realistic, what you actually mean is you get to see like more graphic deaths and that really excites you. It doesn't excite me, but I get it. But claiming that Andor is like quote unquote more realistic than stuff like the Acolyte is really not true because it goes to what you're saying. It's like the Acolyte is going to all the layers. It lets you have the fairy tale in some ways because it's a very fantastical looking show, but it also peels away the fairy tale and says, we're moving from childhood into adulthood. Things are more complicated in the adult world. It isn't just like Superman versus Lex Luthor. Like one guy is really 100% good and one guy's 100% bad. The real world is full of nuances, is full of like shadows, and it's hard to say like one thing is absolutely correct and one thing is absolutely not correct. We're allowed to live in a messy way. And I think that's exciting for storytelling. I like that sort of realism where things get to have layers and they aren't clear cut. That's ideal for me.
And you
That
know
that
what?
that's one
I
of my favorite things about this story is the gray element for sure. Uh, I feel like Leslie kind of lays out the characters and lets you decide for yourself because you can identify with anybody's arc and you can find anybody the villain in the arc too. Like I'm sure there's people out there who find Osha and Chimera the villains. I'm sure there's people,
Absolutely.
obviously a lot of us find Soul the villain. So
Right.
it's a very gray story, and that's one of my favorite elements of it. And I think that's one of the things a lot of people don't like about it. But for me, I loved it, and I want to see more Star Wars like that.
I think that's really a strength of it. And I think too, for me personally, I feel like Andor kind of primed me for this type of story. I
Oh,
wish
interesting.
I could gatekeep because I'm so sick of y'all gaslighting me. Y'all hated Andor when it came out. I
Oh,
remember. And now
that's
you're
true.
sitting here in my
I
face.
remember their articles and their YouTube
Oh my
videos.
gosh. Season 2 gonna come
Yeah,
out.
they
Y'all
called
gonna
it
hate it then
boring.
too. But I do
Yep.
feel like it primed me because the story did have some of those types of elements. I think that makes me appreciate the Acolyte more because I can look at that and say, yeah, like, okay, I get it. You got good intentions. I understand, but you did a bad thing. Or
Mm.
like, I understand that you're hurt and you're upset and this led to this, but you feel like it freed. Like, I get it. I just, oh, I'm so sick of these people talking about Andor. I love that show too, but y'all are lying. You're lying.
all day. And like it's really kind of disgusting too because like some of the things that they were complaining about is just really like it's 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 written into the story for you to be upset. You are supposed to be mad at what's that guy's name? Sarek, the one that's like crazy that like lives with his mom. I can't remember his name.
Oh,
But
Cyril Karn,
Cyril,
and
yes, thank you.
I call him Cereal.
Like you're supposed to find him odious. You're supposed to find him, whatever. But because, he works for the thing and he's like, living like he's like an incel, but like they caught that and like they're like, oh well, we don't like how he's being portrayed in this show. And it's like, well, but that's how you are in real life, like people who are like that. And I think Andor is obviously also more well received because like people know what's going to happen in the end. You know what I mean? Like at the end of Andor you get Rogue One, so it's
Right.
obvious that like it's going to lead into that, you know the Death Star is going to blow up. So I feel like for them, it's so much more easier to pretend like, oh, well, this show makes more sense and it has so much more depth. It does. It has these things, but it's not for the reasons that you say. It's for the
Mm,
reasons that like the dialogue and the moments are important. It's not like, sorry, I love Andor too. I just think that like the way that it's been talked about as like, Star Wars for adults is just like it's because obviously it's written in that way, but it's also because like the audience is accepting that type of story. They don't want to accept that with the Acolyte. They want something that's just, what they're used to with, forgiveness and the guy saves the girl and we have to
mm,
just accept the very surface level nature
mm,
of the
mm.
story. And it's so much more
Well,
layered and so much more deep.
I think they also really like bleak stories a lot. When the Acolyte was first canceled, we were all wiling out on Twitter. We're losing it very deservedly, and we're going off. And I've abandoned this plan. I'm not going to pursue it. But I initially had this plan to create a series of videos just going in on all of the stuff that they like, you know, and which I don't have a problem with people liking different things. But when I look at the series that, the people that hate the Acolyte and are coming after us, all the time, when I look at the stuff that they like, it's all this so bleak. It's very bleak. This person dies a horrible death. That person kills them in a horrible way. This person's depressed all the time. And it's just, there's no joy, there's no laughter. If you laughed and it's corny, it's not serious TV or movie anymore. You're like, what? That's not enjoyable. I don't think that's enjoyable personally, that template. And again, I'm not trying to say these things are horrible and objectively, I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that I don't think that you're in a position to criticize what other people enjoy if the only things that you enjoy are just like bleak porn, basically, of people suffering all the time, being miserable, making other people miserable. I would call your taste into question objectively if that's the only thing that you like. That's the only thing you like to watch.
And the people liking Andor who don't really see the deep story in it are
Hmm.
just able to watch from a place of privilege. Because I've only watched Andor once because of how real and heavy hitting it was for me. I
Hmm.
can't. I don't even know if I can watch it in preparation for season two because it was a lot and it was very personal. But like the good things about Andor don't take away from Acolyte. I wish people would realize I like both of my shows that start with an A,
Hmm.
and I just think it's 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 fine. Like it doesn't have to.
Yeah,
Why does it have to be a competition?
it doesn't have to
I
be.
guarantee you, if you looked at both of them, the things you like in Andor, you would probably like in Acolyte if you actually watched the show and was
Yeah,
willing to get past the fact that the lead character is a black femme. I think
right,
that you would be fine with the storyline.
right,
But
That's the
exactly.
thing that frustrates me the most too, because I feel like I'm pitted against shows like Andor and Skeleton Crew,
Mhm.
and I don't want to be. I'm interested in, but I loved Andor. I thought Andor was great when it was running. I watched it and I thought it was great. And I'm watching Skeleton Crew. I'm enjoying it, but I feel it feels almost like I'm a traitor because
Oh,
like like well I mean because we're
you
in this
are a traitor, JC. No, I'm kidding.
but we're in this
You are a
fight,
traitor.
and they cancel our show, and like every little bit of help I give Skeleton Crew helps prove the haters right,
Mm.
and it's just annoying, because I don't want it to be that way. I want to be able to support all of Star Wars, and like here
I've
we
really
are.
been of I've been of two minds about that. I haven't been watching Skeleton Crew only because I'm so bitter. But if I if I wasn't bitter, I think it would probably be the better option to watch it because Disney has been pulling away from doing Disney programming at all. And so, I mean, Star Wars programming at all. And so, if we want to show them that they should renew the Acolyte, it's probably a better decision to watch the Skeleton Crew and put its views up and say, like, and they can see, like, who's watching what. They know if you're watching the Acolyte like 10 times, but they can see when you also watch Skeleton Crew, right? Like, they track all that stuff. So, that would probably be good to do that. I just can't bring myself to do it because I'm angry. But
You should see
Well,
me watching with my arms folded. I'm
yeah,
pouting.
that's it. That's me too. Well, and
But like,
what's
oh, go
frustrating
ahead.
me is like it's not like we're talking about the Acolyte's intelligent, it's for adults and Andor too, and like Skeleton Crew is getting back to Star Wars for kids, and I like that about it. But
mm,
like everybody's all like, "Oh, this is great," and like like there's a lot of things in there, like especially this last episode, where if Leslie Headland had written that into a story, she would never have gotten away with that shit. We would never have heard the end of it. Like if
Right.
there was some magical chamber, say, I don't, never mind. You know what? I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who's not watching it. But there's just a lot of things where it's like stuff happens with no explanation, no reasonable explanation, and
oh,
it's like if Leslie Headland had done that shit, we would still be hearing about it today.
It's
wow.
it's very 2 + 2 = 4, and that's fine. Like I said, I have enjoyed it. I'm choosing to not tweet about it though, because y'all not gonna come back at me and
Oh,
say, "Well, you
absolutely.
you were tweeting." No, I wasn't. You will not catch
Absolutely.
me. You will not catch me. But
They can
yeah,
have our views, but not our promotion. That's a step too far, Disney.
yeah.
I'm not going to promote the freaking show. I might watch it. I
I
am
watch it for
interested
free, but
now, hearing about some magical chamber. I like magical chambers. Maybe I'll start watching
it,
it tonight.
yeah, it's fine. It's good. I but yeah, I just don't talk about it.
Mm, mm. Yeah, we should watch the show, you guys. We should. It'll prove.
I don't want to.
I know.
Thank you, Papa.
It's not
Stay
even
with
that though.
me.
Like,
Stay
I'm
with
not the
me.
target audience for Ghost Neighbor. But the thing is, as a Star Wars fan, I can acknowledge that I'm not the target audience. And you know what I'm not gonna do? I'm not gonna
Uh,
bash it online. I might watch it eventually. I probably
okay.
will. But it's like,
Well, see,
I'm
there
not.
you go.
It's like,
Well,
okay,
Yeah,
not everything is
and
meant for me, and that's fine. Like,
that's some
well,
effort.
and let me play devil's advocate. I don't think the Acolyte is I'm the target audience for the Acolyte, but I loved that shit. You know what? So,
Mm,
like, I wish more people would have an open mind about the franchise because it's a very large and especially with Disney running it now, it's a very large, diverse franchise. So,
yeah.
I do
if
Well,
you
not.
don't like it,
they really screwed themselves over because that was the point of them greenlighting the show, right? Was
right,
to be a gateway drug to the rest of Star Wars.
And
So,
it did. It gateway drugged. 'Cause
yeah. Yeah, that's the point. Is like, okay, here's a little taste. Now go watch all these other things. That's what they're supposed to be doing. They messed themselves up. I don't even know what their marketing strategy is right now. Like, what are you doing?
I
I
just
made this point.
I don't want Star Wars to be one thing. That's all I'm saying. Like I
Hmm.
cannot deal with the same thing over and over.
Right.
Variety is the spice of life. Please.
Yeah.
And people who are just like, yes, Skeleton Crew is so much better written. I'm sorry. I'm one of those people who is very easy for me to predict storylines when I watch something. I
Right.
liked about the Acolyte that I had no idea what they were going to do next.
Me too. Yes.
Skeleton Crew is very straightforward to me, and that's fine. It's not a bad thing, but
Mm,
it doesn't. They're two different things. It's apples and oranges. Like
mm.
it's not. We should be able to have our fruit bowl instead of just
Right.
oranges. I don't want
Right.
just oranges,
Exactly. I
please.
want some mango. I know some cherries. Can I
Yes,
get a variety, please? Star Wars.
please. Give me the buffet.
You
And I
know,
mentioned
it.
this on
Yeah.
Blue
Go
Sky
ahead.
too. Sorry, no, I was just gonna say I mentioned this on Blue Sky too. Like it makes no sense that they can't keep pumping out content. Like it's
Right.
really people who don't like Star Wars that are like, oh, I feel overwhelmed. Like, do you
Right.
feel overwhelmed when your favorite artist keeps giving you music? Like, I know everybody was like mad at Rihanna for like a long time because she had album after album after album, but now where are y'all at? You're in her DMs,
All
like,
right.
where's the music? And she's blocking you because this is what happens is like we as people, like, we get spoiled and we get like really kind of entitled. Like, maybe this is just American, so excuse me anybody who's not American and doesn't understand this, but we just get really entitled and really spoiled about, like, what we consume, and then we just don't respect the art or the artist who's giving it to us, even if they're doing it over and over and over for us. And it's just like we're losing out because of it. And that's all I'm trying to say. We can have so much more with this $1 billion, like, understand this company makes more money than all of the people on the planet. Like,
Yeah.
if everybody got $1, they make more than that and more than
Right.
that on top of that. So like
Right.
it's crazy to say that they can't pump out another 108.
Did we lose her? I think we lost you, Sixth
Yeah,
Babe.
can't hear anymore.
Sorry, my bad. I was saying it makes no sense to say that they can't continue to pump out $200 million shows like
Hmm.
back to back. Like, you can put away $1 billion for just TV shows and still
Definitely.
have so much money. Like, that's crazy to me that we even entertained this
And that would
argument when it started.
that would be a good investment. It's like that's the reason, I think now today's CEOs are like, oh, the reason we're making so much money is just so I can pocket more money. But when these people started these companies, like Walt Disney, when Walt Disney was starting these sorts of companies, the point of making a lot of money is so that you can pour money into other things without having them have that immediate huge return. Like you're making an investment in yourself. So you can build a park, you can start a film series, you can start a TV series. It doesn't have to return immediately $5 billion because in 2, 3, 5 years, it'll give you that return later. And that's when you get your investment back.
I
Yeah,
just
like, how
don't know
much
where they
did Snow
strategy.
White make when it first came out? Like, are we really serious? And
Right.
now it's like one of the biggest movies ever. Like,
It's their flagship. Yeah.
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, Zay. Please continue. Or Freckles. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I wonder where their strategy team is at because this is such a bad strategy. Like
So
it,
bad.
it's not good.
No.
It's
It's
very
not
bad.
sustainable at all, and
Mhm.
it's very short term, very myopic. Like it's just no
And
thanks.
they know it's bad. They
Mhm.
know it's bad because they're sitting there in interviews saying, "We'll see. We don't know how. We'll see." Like,
Right.
are you really? I don't think you should be saying that. You should be saying you have a plan and
Right.
we just can't tell you. But instead, you're saying we'll see.
Ugh.
And it's
The
like
worst.
then people talking about the budget. If I was Lucasfilm at Disney, I'd be like, "Oh, so y'all trying to say I'm broke? That's crazy."
Right.
Not for
I
the money.
That's
know.
that's
You
pretty much
called me
what they're
broke.
saying.
Exactly. Exactly
Because
that.
the money should be going to making a better show. What, first of all, you don't pay for it. Second of all, they're not at a shortage of money. Third of all, my show was good. I want it back.
Right.
Hashtag 3 seasons in a movie.
3 seasons and a
And
movie.
you can still get your other stuff. You can get your
And we can
CGI
still
Luke
have it.
Skywalker. It's all good. It's not a competition.
It's a money
Buffet.
grab. It's a money grab. Like, you have to really be out of your mind to say that 33 million in stock buybacks after that's what they're afraid of, is because we can
Right.
trace the money now. It's not like how they used to be able to give us a sleight of hand and some CEO was able to blow it.
Right.
That's why Pablo was highlighting that
Yes. He
highlighted
just
that
made that
message.
thread.
Yes, he said, I have been in rooms where they have wasted millions. they waste so much money. Like oh
Right.
my God, I'm shaking. Like they're trying to rob us, and like I can't sit for it. Like I cannot without shouting it from like the rooftops. They're trying to steal as much as they can. That's why Moana was supposed to be Moana was supposed to be a multi-season show, but now it's the
Uh-huh.
fifth highest grossing show, like, movie of the year. They're
Uh-huh.
literally just doing everything they can to pump as much money and then dump it, because that
Yeah.
is what's getting the quickest, like we were just saying, returns. It's like overinflating the value and then
Uh-huh.
selling it off, or like throwing it away until
Uh-huh.
they can just take whatever they can off the top. Like that's really what we're looking at. It's corporate greed.
And the
Yeah.
people who made it as a show probably won't even get the same back to them that they'd get from it being a movie.
Mm.
So they might have just got stiffed out of their money.
Now that you said
Mm.
that, I'm on a mental rabbit hole because now I'm wondering like what's the different like accounting treatments versus a movie and a show, because like I'm telling you,
Mm-hmm.
corporate gets real creative with this stuff. Like
Yeah.
now I want to see the dollars. Where's
It's all
I want
fake.
to
Yeah.
see the income statements, I want to see the balance sheets, I want to see it all.
It's
It's why
fake.
they're going to Grogu and Mando. It's why they're making it a movie, because again, they're trying to pump as much money without having to pay millions and millions and millions again in the future. Like Andor
Ridiculous.
being as high as it is, like we're never going to see like regular television again, because
Mm.
there's no way that any company besides Disney can sustain that type of like television model. Like
Mm.
it's just gonna go out the window now. It's like how Game of Thrones destroyed everything too. It's like now everything has to have, you know, a like cult following off of the jump, and it has to
Right.
be a million people strong for
Which
it to
is
be
not
considered.
realistic. That's just not like I was yelling when they canceled it. I was so heartbroken, like we all were. But I was yelling online that, if you just release a show and it's in a new setting, it's in the High Republic, it has new characters, it has no one who looks like Boba Fett, like the Mandalorian looks like Boba Fett, right? That's like why we all watched it initially. Because like, oh, a guy who looks just like Boba Fett, that's interesting. It has no tie-in to like Luke or other movies. It's totally new. These things always take time to build an audience. Always. That's not negotiable. It always happens. You have the one-offs, the crazy successes, right? Like the Stranger Things, like Lightning, everybody's talking about it because it's so crazy. You have those. But for the majority, the vast like 99.5% of TV, it's going to take time to build an audience, and you're not going to suffer just because it takes time to do that.
And those things aren't going to happen again because the environment is already changed from then.
Right.
Like you're never you're never going to make the first ever Star Wars live action show again. You've already done it
Exactly.
during the pandemic. It's not going to happen
Exactly.
again. So release
With us
that.
all trapped in our houses, so we have nothing to watch
Yeah.
but Mandalorian.
And so now the streaming
That's
model
a great
keeps
point.
changing. All that stuff that happened, it happened, organically. It's not going to happen now when you're trying to force it to happen. It's the fact it's going to get worse.
Yeah,
So let them figure it out. I'll
it's
be
insane.
waiting when they decide to renew my show.
Right. We're not going anywhere. And we're recruiting new fans for y'all every day. And those fans are recruiting new fans, and those fans are recruiting new fans. It's just going to keep going. So you guys might as well just go ahead and renew our show.
Like I said, by my silence, I'll take season 2, 3 a movie,
Yes.
and a check.
Yeah.
See, I added on money now. You could have just renewed
Yeah.
the show, and now I want money.
You got to
We need
pay us
those.
for our pain and suffering
Facts.
because we've been suffering and there's been pain. I need to be paid for that. Thanks.
Yeah,
Right.
this is free promo. Send
Yes.
me my check in the mail, express, please.
Every day. Yes. Every day we're out
Stay on the
here doing
line.
this for
Yes.
you, Lucasfilm.
Yes. 20 hours sometimes. I'd be like online arguing with people. I need a check.
Yes. Yeah, Filoni, you guys, it's Favreau, you guys can cut us all check. We will not mind. I love it. Amazing. Any other last thoughts? Because I'm definitely it's 8:10 Eastern time, so I'm about to cut it here. But any other last thoughts before we sign off? I do have some notes for everybody who's listening. I don't know how your guys' year 2024 was. My 2024 kicked my ass all over the place, all up and down the street. It has been brutal. It has been a brutal year. It has been horrible. So I need a little break, a little tiny bit of a break. So the show will actually be going on hiatus for 2 weeks. We will be back on January 18th, fresh, bushy tailed, bright eyed, ready to tell all the information about the Acolyte. Here are some great new topics for you. Here are some great new discussions and amazing panels. We'll have all the stuff. We'll have all the stuff going on. But we will be on hiatus for 2 weeks until January 18th when we come back. Please go ahead and join the new show community space on Twitter, right here on Twitter. I have opened a community, cost me $3 a month. I'm paying Elon because I can't do it without paying him. But but I do not mind because it's an amazing space. We have 24 people in there already. If you're listening later, go ahead and join the community. It is linked in the comments to this space. It is called RTA Acolyte Spaces Chat, and we can continue all of these conversations over there. We will be continuing some topics over the hiatus, over the break as well for you guys. I do also want to remind anybody who was not here at the beginning to please go ahead and leave your review on Rotten Tomatoes. We need you. We have been seeing progress. This is amazing. We're seeing progress because there are so many reviews. I didn't think we would see it, but we're starting to see it already. So I'm so happy. So it's going to be long. It's going to be long going, but we're going to get the Acolyte back to fresh because there's more of us than there is of them. I'm absolutely convinced of that. Absolutely true. So we just have to get everybody who loves the show to go ahead and leave their Rotten Tomatoes review. And then those CEOs will stop panicking because the reviews mean so much to them. They'll stop panicking. They'll say, oh, okay, we have a good Rotten Tomatoes review. We can maybe think about going ahead and renewing the show and giving the movie like they need. We really love you guys. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you to our speakers for coming on. Thank you to Sith Babe for the awesome topic today. So many good conversations came out of your notes, Sith Babe. I really appreciate that work that you did. If you want to support us, it is linked in the comments as well. You can drop us a little tip or coffee on coffee.com. You can also support the fundraiser for our upcoming billboards and actions, our petition and letter writing at savetheacolyte.com, where you'll also find the link to all sorts of articles and art. It's a great website. Head on over there as well if you have not been there yet. I think that's it for us. I'm gonna miss you guys for the next 2 weeks, but I'll be online, and then we'll be back on January 18th. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you, Say, for the sound effects. All right, we'll see you, and may the force be with you all always.